Good morning. The time is now 9:35 a.m. and a quorum of the board is present. The State Board of Education meeting of December 14th, 2021 is called to order. First item on the agenda is the approval of agenda in order of priority. Are there any items board members would like to add or delete from the agenda? Dr. Pugh.
I guess my question is, I just want to know what are the items that will be on the agenda for the legislative agenda, and if some of the proposals are not there, resolutions are not there, then I would like to add them.
Okay. There are no legislative committee agenda items on the agenda for vote.
So no items will be discussed during the legislative.
There'll be items discussed. There'll be no votes.
Will there be the resolutions regarding the layered approach or the broken up layered approach to mitigating COVID, and will we be discussing the CRT?
There'll be some discussion of the last legislative committee meeting, and in that context, there may be some discussion of, but there'll be no votes. There's been no transmission of materials 24 hours in advance of.
But I did send items 24 hours in advance of, 2 months ago.
There were items that were sent 2 months ago. The legislative committee has worked on some of those items, and there was some conversation around fleshing those out a little bit more fully. But to your question, there's nothing on this agenda to be voted on today. Please.
Then I move to put the items as written, and I can send it, and we can vote it up, vote it down, but I want to discuss the COVID layered approach to mitigating COVID in schools, in communities, and I would like to move that be placed on the agenda.
Are you asking for a discussion, or are you asking for resolutions?
The resolutions.
Can I ask which resolutions we're referring to?
There was a proposed one, but I'm looking for the package because given the dire conditions that we are in, I would like to make sure that we make some sort of a statement or one way or the other.
Okay. What would you like us to reflect upon? What language would you like us to reflect upon?
I can send the language that I sent in October. We discussed a bit in November, and I think that the legislative committee discussed during the November legislative committee. We can discuss it, we can vote it up, or we can vote it down, but we just need to get a statement out there. And I know that there is a piece that another piece that I've seen, and we can put that out there as well.
Okay. I mean, typically at this moment, we put specific elements on the agenda. And so what are you motioning to put specifically on the agenda at this time? Given the fact that it's at the board meeting, we had an informal agreement to give 24 hours of notice in advance of, that was being fleshed out by the legislative committee. What specifically would you like on the agenda?
We can put on the agenda the proposed resolution that I submitted to the full board in October and also in November.
So the three-part resolution?
Yes.
Okay, fair enough. So this is a three-part resolution, board. There's a motion from Dr. Pugh to put the three-part resolution from October on the agenda. That three-part resolution includes a mandatory mask directive from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services Director, number one, support of the Biden proposal on vaccinations, number two, and interagency cooperation on indoor air and water quality among state agencies, number three. So we have a motion on the table to add that for discussion and vote during legislative committee. That's the motion. Do I have a second? Okay. Hearing no second, vote on the agenda as put forward.
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I have a second on the agenda as moved?
Second.
A second? I'm sorry. Yes,
I'm sorry, I was
please.
trying to catch up. I have another proposed agenda item.
Fair enough.
And that is the discussion of the CRT as well as the 1619 project and the bills that have gone forward and our stance on education as it relates to historical factors that slavery and the historical factors that continue to impact the racial disparities.
So from clarity perspective, is this a discussion in the legislative agenda, or is this a motion?
I would like to move to put the resolution that I put before this body last month and have asked multiple times, starting back in October or September, to put on the agenda. I would like to have that resolution and the resolution that I brought to this body last month.
Okay, so it was the resolution that was crafted in October.
Yes, and I did see some amendments, so an amended version. So I would like to have that amended version and have that discussion with the two.
Okay.
So yes,
So what are you motioning to put on the agenda?
I am motioning to put on the agenda the resolution that I proposed and provided to this body last month, and would like to have the edits that have been made to it as well for discussion and for vote.
So you want both on the agenda? You want one on the agenda, the other on the agenda? Because as a rule, we bring a single item forward on a topic, and we vote it up or we vote it down. We discuss it, we vote it up, we vote it down. As a rule, we don't have competing resolutions, if you will.
And not competing resolutions. I want language for us to be able to pull from. I think in a version that you gave me, you showed me a version that the legislative committee had put forward. And I think this is for the other resolution, but I would use that same template where you gave me the language, but then you also put towards the bottom what my proposed language was. And that is what I would like to be on the agenda.
Okay, please.
Question, was that shared with the full board?
The full board has not seen that, no.
Okay.
No.
Okay,
So, yeah, please.
then I'll take my language that has been shared with the full
Fair
board a
enough.
month ago.
So the motion on the table for amendment of the agenda is the motion to consider the resolution on CRT, race and racism, shared by Dr. Pugh at the October State Board meeting. So we have a motion to amend the agenda. Do we have a second for that? Hearing none. If we can vote on the base agenda. Motion, if I recall correctly, there was a motion remotely from Mr. McMillan to move. Do I have a second on the base agenda? I'm sorry, second on the base agenda? Second on the base agenda from Ms. Snyder. Any discussion on the base agenda? Hearing none, all in favor? Roll call vote, please. Mertz, I apologize.
Lipton,
Yes.
McMillan,
Yes.
Pritchett,
Yes.
Pugh,
No.
Snyder,
Yes.
Strayhorn,
Yes.
Tilly. Tilly absent. Tilly absent. Albridge,
Yes.
motion carries.
2 weeks ago, board members and members of the community, we had a tragedy in our state and in our country, in Oxford. If we could please observe a moment of silence in unity with and support for the Oxford community. This time, Marilyn Schneider, our State Board Executive, will introduce the members of the State Board of Education.
Happy to do so. You've just been listening to the chairman of the board, State Superintendent Dr. Michael Rice. To his left, as we go around the table, Dr. Cassandra Albrecht, president from Dearborn. She is physically present here. Dr. Pamela Pugh is next to her. She's vice president of the board from Saginaw, physically present. Joining us virtually is Tiffany Tilley. She's secretary of the board from West Bloomfield. In accordance with the Open Meetings Act, when she does join us, she is expected today. I don't think she's on the line right now. She will be able to vote due to a medical condition. Ms. Nikki Snyder is SBE Legislative Committee member. She's from Dexter. She is physically present here for the meeting. Also joining us virtually by way of medical condition and able to vote is Ms. Ellen Lipton, chair of the board's Legislative Committee from Huntington Woods. As we go around the table here in the room is the current teacher of the year, Ms. Leah Porter. She's a third grade teacher at Wilcox Elementary School in Holt Public Schools. And as we go across the table, joining us virtually is Ms. Patty Redinger. She's the governor's representative. She's director of federal affairs, ex officio member. And as we keep coming around the table, Dr. Judith Pritchett, NASB delegate and State Board of Education Legislative Committee member from Washington Township. She is in the room. Also in the room, Mr. Jason Strayhorn, SBE Legislative Committee member from Novi. Mr. Tom McMillan, treasurer from Oakland Township, is joining us virtually by reason of a medical condition, and he is able to vote in accordance with the Open Meetings Act. Thank you.
Thank you, Marilyn. Mr. Kyle Garant, our Deputy Superintendent of Finance and Operations, will make an introduction. Mr. Garant.
Thank you, Dr. Rice. It's my pleasure to introduce the new director of our Office of Financial Management here in the department, Spencer Simmons. This is his second day on the job, so Spencer, you want to share a little about yourself?
Good morning to the State School Board, all the other attendees in the audience today, general public. My name is Spencer Simmons. I joined MDE from State Police, where I actually was for 19 years. I left State Police as the financial manager, and I have experience dealing with budgeting, grants, auditing, you name it. So I'm very active in the community. I serve on different boards. I serve Enum Community Health Centers Board, Sparrow Specialty Hospitals Board. I serve on a board for a company organization known as Thrivent, and also Uplift Our Youth. So I'd like to thank all of you for all the hard work that you do for education throughout the state of Michigan. It is an honor to actually be working with MDE. Thank you.
Thank you. We welcome Mr. Simmons. We're delighted to have him on board with his leadership. We appreciate the leadership of the former budget director, now retired, Ms. Ann Richmond, who did a terrific job within the department. We will miss her, but we appreciate Mr. Simmons joining the department. It's always good to have the state police on your side. With respect to public comment, public may provide comments during the public participation portion of the meeting at approximately 1 p.m. Public comments will be accepted from those in person and online who register before 1 p.m. today. If you wish to offer public comment online during the meeting, send an email to schneiderm@michigan.gov. Provide your name, city, and telephone number from which you will be calling. You will receive an email with the call-in number and conference ID. To provide public comment in person, please complete a public comment form when you arrive here at the meeting location. These instructions are listed on the MDE webpage at www.michigan.gov/MDE. First item on the Committee of the Whole agenda is educational updates related to COVID. This is an informational presentation and no board action is required. And board, I'm going to break this up into a narrative and a brief PowerPoint, if I may. In Michigan, since our last state board meeting 5 weeks ago, the number of COVID-19 cases has risen from 1.172 million to just shy of 1.4 million cases, an increase of approximately 224,000 cases, or more than 19%, with the number of deaths increasing from 22,684 to 25,240, a rise of 2,556, or roughly 11%. Associated rates have increased since the last state board meeting. Our vaccination rates continue to climb, slowly but steadily. 72.6% of Michigan residents ages 18 and above have received at least an initial vaccination, with 44.3% of students 12 to 15 years old and 17.5% of students 5 to 11 years old with at least an initial vaccination. In total, more than 10.7 million doses of vaccine have been administered to Michigan residents. Worldwide, 8.47 billion vaccine doses have been administered. It is with the vaccination of significant portions of our population that we are going to be able to minimize COVID cases, hospitalizations, and deaths. Unvaccinated individuals are far more likely to be vulnerable than are vaccinated individuals for sickness, hospitalization, and death. According to the Johns Hopkins Coronavirus Center, worldwide there have been more than 271 million COVID cases and more than 5.31 million deaths associated with COVID as of last night. Nationally, there have been 50 million cases of COVID-19 and 798,000 deaths associated with COVID-19, with 18.4% of the world's cases and 15% of the world's deaths associated with COVID-19. The U.S. continues to lead the world in both categories. In our layering of mitigation strategies recommended by the Centers for Disease Control and the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, vaccination is clearly of paramount importance. The growing number of Michiganders who are getting vaccinated are protecting not simply themselves, but others as well. You're helping to reduce sickness, hospitalizations, and death, and to increase the numbers of days and hours our children and staff are in person in school. The layering of mitigation strategies requires masks, social distancing, proper hygiene, and at times testing, isolation, and quarantining as well. As you know, Board, the greatest challenge facing our schools in the midst of the pandemic, besides the pandemic itself, is addressing the pandemic-exacerbated teacher shortage, the seventh goal of the state's top 10 strategic education plan. While no one denies the presence of a shortage anymore, as many did when I began in this position 2.5 years ago, we need legislators not only to acknowledge the problem, but to accept responsibility for being a good portion of the potential solution to the problem as well. Last summer, for the first time, the state legislature dedicated $5 million for teacher retention. This summer, the state legislature earmarked $1.5 million for Grow Your Own programs, largely but not exclusively to help support staff members become teachers. While these are important investments, they need to be very, very substantially expanded. Let's remind some, if we could, and share with many others why we are where we are with respect to the teacher shortage, what local districts in the department have done relative to the shortage, and, most importantly, what remains to be done to rectify the teacher shortage. Where we have a very brief set of slides to share with our community, reshare in a number of cases with you. As you know, our state's top 10 state strategic education plan has 8 goals. The seventh goal, as I mentioned, of the state strategic education plan is to address the teacher shortage, to rectify the teacher shortage. Why is there a teacher shortage? Well, there's a teacher shortage not simply in Michigan, but across the country. We, however, have a teacher shortage exacerbated by two things. We have a teacher shortage exacerbated by underfunding of public education in the state, number one, and exacerbated by a pandemic, number two. Michigan ranked 50th of 50 states in total education revenue growth, inflation adjusted, from 1995 to 2015 in the state. That 20-year underfunding of public education in the state affects every child in every school, in every district in the state every day. That underfunding is in our public education budget bases across the state as we speak. In 2011, the state legislature cut $470 per child. There were teacher layoffs, there were pay freezes, there were pay cuts, there were eliminations of support staff positions and layers of administration. There were increases in class sizes. In addition, teachers and other staff members had to pay higher shares of health insurance costs and higher shares of retirement costs. Finally, there was a requirement to include in educator evaluation law, state statute, a percentage of each teacher's evaluation associated with state summative assessments. All of this made the profession a less attractive profession. That's not simply my view, although it is my view, it's also the view of people considering the profession. Let's look at this slide. You can see here that while a number of our young people continued in their teacher prep programs after 2011, if they were in the pipeline, they continued through the pipeline. If I'm a sophomore or a junior in a teacher prep program, I continue in that program, notwithstanding the bad news in 2011. But what happened shortly thereafter? You can see the diminution in the numbers beginning in 2014, 2015, a decline to 14,000 people in teacher prep programs from 23,000, and just a couple of years later, more than a 50% decline in teacher prep program participation. It is true that in the last few years, we've begun to reinflate those numbers. Those numbers are beginning to rise again. That's the good news. The bad news is that they continue to be just a bit more than 50% of what they were a handful of years ago. So you can see the pretty precipitous decline in our teacher prep program enrollment as a function of public policy. This was not disconnected from public policy. This was a result of public policy. Public policy that was passed by our state legislature. If you look at the next slide, you can see critical shortage areas historically on the left, and then more recently, in the last few years, that is to say, on the right. Many of us never thought that we would see elementary teacher positions placed on a critical shortage list. Many of us didn't think that we would see social studies teachers, physical education teachers, English language arts teachers placed on the critical shortage list, but of course that's what we have today. Go to the next slide. What you see is our interest is not simply in teacher quantity and quality, although we are very, very concerned about both teacher quantity and quality, but we're also concerned about the diversity within the workforce as well. At the top of this PowerPoint slide, you see that 90.8% of our teachers are white. Just a little bit more than 9% of our teachers are of color, are of different ethnicities. The same is not true of our students. Our students are approximately 65% white, approximately 35% of color or of other ethnicities. In other words, our young people are 4 times as likely to be diverse, as is our teacher workforce. There's research that shows that there is a value to our young people, in particular our young people of color, to see them in the teaching profession. Not every day, but at times. There's powerful Johns Hopkins research from 3 years and 2 months ago, but who's counting, that indicates that the likelihood of graduating from high school, going on to college, rises by 13% for African American students if they have one teacher of color by the end of third grade, and rises by 32% if they have two teachers of color by the end of third grade. So it's not simply quantity and quality that are important, but diversity as well. If you go to the next slide, what you can see is that though the number of African American teachers declined from 05 to 15 in our state, that number has increased in the last half decade by 666 teachers. It needs to continue to increase, yes, but there's been some progress made in the last half decade, and we are strongly encouraging and drumbeating around not only more teacher candidates of color in the pipeline, but more teacher candidates hired by school districts on the back end. In addition, a number of our initiatives that we're encouraging would create a more diverse workforce as well. So what are school districts and the department doing? So we've advocated strongly that we pay our teachers more. When teachers leave the profession, or when people indicate why they don't go into the profession, the first thing that they say is, we're not paid enough. There's absolutely a direct relationship between pay and pipeline. But pay is not the only thing. There are teacher workforce conditions, and we have to improve teaching and learning conditions in our schools across the state. Being dead last in the country in total revenue growth, inflation adjusted, for a 20-year period, has really chipped away at our ability to support both students and staff in school districts, and it's adversely affected our pipeline into the profession as well. School district and department efforts. We have encouraged grow your own programs for support staff to become students, to become teachers, and for students to become teachers. And when I talk about support staff, I am talking about paraprofessionals, yes, but I'm also talking about bus drivers and food service employees and custodians and a wide range of other individuals. You are not what you are at a given moment. You are what you are capable of becoming. Everybody in this room and everybody who is listening to this meeting today had the benefit of people pouring into them. And we similarly, if we pour into our support staff, many of them, not all, but many of them are capable of becoming teachers with proper support and improving the profession as a result. I might add, when you pour into grow your own programs for your broad student body across the state, when you pour into grow your own programs for support staff to become teachers, you are not only encouraging an increase in quantity, you are encouraging an increase in diversity in the state as well. Because those two pools, support staff and the broader student population, are more diverse than is the teacher workforce as a whole. So what else are we doing? We've got a Future Proud Michigan Educator Explore program for students interested in becoming teachers. This is a curricular program. This is driven in part by the efforts of the Office of Educator Excellence in the department. We awarded more than $1 million for Grow Your Own programs for students interested in becoming teachers. This is important initial money, but it is insufficient. We've got a Welcome Back Proud Michigan Educator program. That Welcome Back Proud Michigan Educator program started several months ago. We invited formerly certificated people to come back into the profession. We invited them back with reduced or eliminated professional development hours needed for their recertification. More than 1,000 formerly certificated people said, we're interested. 336 districts said we're interested in considering them. We've had, to date, 161 districts request waivers of recertification requirements for 228 formally certificated educators. In addition, we have reached out to those who are certified but who are not teaching in the profession. And we've said, we want you back as well. We want you to consider the profession. And another 1,000 of those have said, we're interested in participating in this virtual matchmaking, if you will, between school districts looking for teachers and prospective teachers. We've got 2 alternative certification programs that we approved in the last 12 months. We lifted the moratorium on alternative certification programs. We got 11 applications to become alt-route certification providers. 2 of those applications we viewed favorably, and we ultimately approved those. One was with DPSCD in Detroit. The other was with New Paradigm for Education, also in Detroit. At some point in the next few months, we are likely to relift the moratorium again and to give alt-route providers or prospective alt-route providers another opportunity in this regard. We've created flexibilities in certification, special education certification flexibilities, which you've heard about both from me and Dr. Koenigsegg, and social work flexibilities, which you've heard about on a number of occasions. Those permit people with credentials, but not full credentials, to teach or to serve as social workers without full certification. Finally, we acknowledge that all of these reflections, all of these ideas, both from local school districts and from the department, are insufficient. The reality is that you can't persistently underfund public schools over decades and expect not to have an adverse impact on public schools. So we're recommending a $300 to $500 million investment in teacher recruitment and retention in the state. We've written our state legislature. We've begun meetings with state legislative leaders. We've shared this broadly with our education community. We are going education organization by education organization, drumbeating around this proposal. Here are the elements of the proposal. Tuition and other expense reimbursement, not simply for current college students, but also for support staff members who have an interest in becoming teachers. We're going to have to incentivize or minimally reduce the expense associated with becoming teachers in our state. We're also advocating for loan forgiveness for young teachers that are paying off their loans. The first of these ideas, the tuition reimbursement, is about recruitment into the profession. The second of these ideas, loan forgiveness, is about retention in the profession, because we've got issues with bringing people into the profession and then with people staying in the profession. We've got to raise those salaries up on the one hand and reduce the burden of loans on our young teachers on the other. You can't expect people to work 2 jobs in order to pay off loans indefinitely. Not to say that some won't do it, but it's not a way to fund your teacher development in a state. We support scholarships for high school seniors who have an interest in becoming teachers. This is a small part of our broader proposal, but it's an important part of our broader proposal. We support a re-strengthening of the teacher preparation pipeline in the Upper Peninsula and the Northern Lower. too dependent upon one teacher prep institution up north. Too dependent. By the way, a teacher prep institution that does a great job. But it's hard to get it done as largely the only entity up north. We support the mentoring of new teachers and the better mentoring of new teachers. You know, the good news is we have a mentoring law, a teacher mentoring law in the state of Michigan. That's the good news. The bad news is that teacher mentoring law comes with no money. So it basically says, thou shalt mentor. Period, paragraph. That seems somewhat sparse in terms of guidance and very sparse in terms of support. Of course we need a teacher mentoring law, but we also need funds for the mentors. The reality is that people shouldn't be expected to simply do this out of the kindness of their hearts, particularly if they are underpaid to begin with. We're advocating for an easing of statutory restrictions, legislative restrictions on reciprocity. Now, the good news is we get 1,100 teachers. We got in 2019, 2020, 1,160 teachers from out of state. Some people say, well, we don't do anything with reciprocity. Not true. It's not true. I mean, just because you say it loud and often doesn't mean it's true. A lot of teachers come in from out of state. That's the good news. But we can do better than 1,160. And for the coming few years, we're going to need to do better. We're going to need to go outside the state to recruit, because the reality is we've not developed enough inside the state. We've not developed enough inside the state because the profession is not as attractive in the state as it used to be. So we want some easing of legislative restrictions around reciprocity. What we want to be able to do is, if someone has taught successfully for 3 years in another state with certification, we want to be able to bring them into the state reciprocally without them having to take the MTTC. Their teaching experience will be their calling card. The MTTC does not necessarily need to be it. So you've been in a program outside of the state, you've had successful teaching experience outside of the state, we want you. Welcome back, proud Michigan educators. We want you back. This is we want you. There's a little bit of Motown in all of this. We have, those half dozen are the primary ideas that we're pushing with the state legislature. But there are another half dozen ideas that deserve consideration as well. We believe that we know that there are many people that walked right up to the beginning of the profession and chose not to enter the profession. We want to crack at them. People walk away from things for all sorts of reasons. Illness in family, death in family, momentary consideration of another profession. We want some funding from the legislature to pursue and to have institutions of higher education, teacher prep institutions, pursue those teachers or would-be teachers that prepared for the profession, didn't go into the profession. They're still lacking one thing or another. We believe that childcare is necessary for those who have children and who want to student teach. We want to remove barriers from our prospective teachers. We believe that we ought to pay to reimburse students for their tuition for the legislatively mandated reading course. We're not advocating the removal of the course. We just think that if it is a requirement of the state legislature, the legislature ought to pay for that. We think all of these programs should be evaluated if approved by the legislature. We believe additional grants are necessary for Grow Your Own programs for middle school and high school. And finally, we believe that there are stipends that are necessary to help defray living costs for those prepared to go into areas where many others aren't prepared to go, either rural, remote areas of the state or urban areas of the state. We're going to have to incentivize to change the marketplace. Many of you are aware of Adam Smith. You may have taken an econ course or two in college. You remember Adam Smith and the invisible hand of markets, the magical way that marketplaces work. And that may work for reams of paper, at least when you don't have supply chain issues. But it doesn't work in the teacher profession when we underfund public schools. We're going to have to subsidize the production and retention of teachers in our state if we are going to rebuild a once proud and still hugely honorable profession in the state. I'm going to stop my filibuster there, Board. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them at this time. Alternatively, I'd be happy to keep on rolling. Questions from board members? Ms. Lipton on the screen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know I've said it before, but I would just like to reiterate that I think that it would be a very good idea for the department to continue to explore the ability to interface with existing college scholarship programs that the state is already funding as a means of enticing and beginning to introduce students to the profession of teaching. We have 12 promise zones throughout the state in some of our most economically disadvantaged communities. We also have programs like Future for Frontliners that brought back thousands of frontline workers into college for the first time. And as someone who has been involved at a very intentional level in the Promise movement, both in Michigan as well as nationally, there is tremendous value in imparting and directing students to particular areas at the point at which you are providing them scholarship dollars. In the programs that I have been involved with in the state, we spend a lot of time on mentoring and coaching students in being successful in college, because it's not just about providing them scholarship dollars, but also getting them into and through college successfully. And I can tell you from experiences I've had over a 10-year period with hundreds of students, that having the ability to discuss with them career options as you are helping them navigate college, you have a ready audience with these students, because, as I said before, the state, although we do not have an inclusive Promise program, when I say inclusive, I mean it is place-based, but that we do have a unique opportunity to be able to speak about teaching as a profession to many, many students through our existing Promise program. So I would continue to encourage the department to explore those existing opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lipton. Dr. Pugh, did you have a comment or a question?
I do.
Okay,
I didn't have my
please.
hand up, but yes, I do.
Okay.
And this is great, and I really do appreciate the effort, the attention that the department is giving to this issue, and you are to be commended for that. You know, I'm going to go right back to where we started from in this conversation, and that's because I do talk to teachers, and really one of the reasons I'm here is because of educators during that time that was losing benefits, losing, almost having to go and get a second job. I knew educators who had to go and get welfare support, and some who had to step away for a little while because it was just such a burden on them. And so here we are back during this time of a pandemic. And so I hear so many teachers, and unfortunately I see so many teachers who are leaving the profession. And one of the things that I see up and down my social media timeline, the messages that I get, is that teachers still do not feel that their voice is heard. They don't feel that the people, such as people who have a platform that we have, those who have the authority, such as DHHS director, the governor, the legislature, who put their health and their well-being in the forefront. And so I just want to put that out there, and I don't know that I saw that in the presentation. And how do we tell educators that we're doing everything that we can to protect their environments? That's in light of Oxford, but that's also in light of this other tragedy that is before us, and that's COVID-19's that's not only not going away, but that's getting away from us and getting far worse.
So your point on voice is well taken. If you look at the first slide regarding school district and department efforts, it talks first and foremost about compensation, because every survey about prospective teachers coming into the profession, teachers considering leaving the profession, talks about compensation. But the next most frequently heard lament is around teaching conditions and around voice. And so we note it in the second bullet in this presentation. The importance of voice is critical. This board for years has had the Michigan Teacher of the Year at the table. It invites regional teachers of the year to present. I've had the opportunity to meet with the RTOYs this year. I'm going to be meeting with the RTOYs again after the new year. I think that teacher voice is critical. It strikes me that education is one of those professions where people at the so-called top of the profession and at the mid-range in the profession have virtually the same education often. And in many cases, teachers have more experience. To our conversation earlier today, in many cases, teachers have more experience than their principals or their superintendents. That's not to denigrate the latter. It's simply to note the math of it. So I think we do well, to your point, to access that experience, that knowledge, that wisdom. I think that's very well put, and I think that's what the literature shows. The literature shows that the more teachers feel involved in and a part of the decision making, the more they're likely to be respected and to stay in the profession. So I absolutely agree with that.
I just
Please.
want to
Yep.
clarify, because that's great, and it's good to know that we are looking at that. The other part of that was the health and safety, and their well-being. And, whether it's Oxford, where we saw teachers speak up and recognize that they saw something, or we're talking about teachers who are saying that they don't know if the air that they're exposed to, children not wearing masks, are exposing them to heightened risk for themselves and their families and their communities. And I hear it all the time, and they want to know who and how are they being protected in that way, because we do see teachers, I know we don't have all the data there, but we do see teachers leaving in this time because they do not feel that their health and safety is being taken as strongly as needs to be.
Thank you. I know I've been in a number of communities. I know that there are different mores, different standards in different communities, and different views about what is healthy in different places. I can tell you that as a rule, I'm masked when I go in, and I'm trying to role model the value of that. But I also know that there are communities that don't agree with me, and I can tell based on my travels. So there are places where everybody is masked, and there are places where I am the masked warrior, if you will. So it's just a reflection. Did I see any other hands? Ms. Porter?
Yes.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Ms. Porter, then Mr. McMillan as the last. Go ahead.
Dr. Rice, I just wanted to share how I appreciate that we're talking about, the retention of teachers and historically over the last decade, what has occurred. I know personally when I started teaching in 2006 and have watched many teachers come into my building since then, almost all of them have had to have a second job within the first 5 years of their teaching career in order to be able to pay to live. So I think it's a very important conversation. We're coming out of 10 years of being stripped away. So we know all the issues that are facing us, but that is a critical piece, I think, in early salaries and in retaining teachers, that we acknowledge the fact that they are grossly underpaid.
Thank you, Ms. Porter. Mr. McMillan, to you.
Yeah, I would also say that teachers are going to continue to leave and probably leave in bigger numbers as they move from pedagogue to therapist with SEL. And also as it becomes more politicized, what they're having to do through CRT and kind of the Marxist, white kids are the oppressors and, the other kids are the oppressed. It's just, this is not what they signed up for. And so I know teachers leaving. I know more will continue to leave as the politicization of the classroom continues from the left. So that I think if you want to stop that, I think that might be a good start.
Okay, thank you, Ms. McMillan. Ms. Snyder?
I can echo a couple of things that Tom just said and that Pam said, but I've had a lot of teachers say to me, I didn't sign up for this, the heaviness that comes to the classroom when they're considered therapists and nurses and all things considered, right? They're very, as much as that's a painful statement to put out there and to speak out loud, a lot of people say it. I did not sign up for this. So you could give them all the resources in the world and talk at great length about what schools should have. But teachers often say that's not what should be happening here. It should be happening before you walk through these doors so that you are prepared and ready to learn. Because that's what I signed up for, right? That's what I hear people say. But I would echo some of the things that Pam said about the safety of teachers. We don't have all the details. The investigation's not complete out of Oxford, and I'm very hesitant to speak too soon. But, I thought from a perspective, when you really break things down in terms of where everybody was at in that situation, what they were thinking, what they had to do, all of those things need to come out. But from a teacher's perspective, if I hand you a piece of paper that's drawing, that drawing was just like gut-wrenching. The sense that that teacher knew that this is a safety issue. I wondered at that point in time, are they empowered to escalate a situation when they need to escalate it? Not just take a drawing to a principal and hope that they'll do the right thing. If they personally feel that their safety or the safety of their classroom, they're the closest to that classroom. If they feel a safety is an issue, are they empowered to take the next step, and escalate it? And what would that look like? And I think you could only deduce that from further conversation, more details, further understanding. But again, I've been in really dangerous situations as a nurse at the bedside, and I can remember what would happen in those scenarios and say to myself, it doesn't really matter to me if I have my manager's approval or support. I know this is unsafe, and I know what I need to do next to make sure that my patients stay safe, I stay safe, and others stay safe. So I just wonder if teachers have that support, and therefore, if they had that support, they would have that voice, right? And they would be heard in that situation, and it wouldn't be such a cascade of events because they're the ones closest to that classroom. And I can very much appreciate what you're saying when you're talking about teacher voice.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Board members, the next item on the Committee of the Whole agenda is presentation on social and emotional learning and children's mental health. Goal 3 of Michigan's Top 10 Strategic Education Plan is to improve the health, safety, and wellness of all learners. We have a team joining us both in person and virtually to present on social emotional learning and children's mental health. This is an informational presentation and no board action is required. We welcome our presenters. Seated at the table are Mr. Kyle Garant, Deputy Superintendent of Finance and Operations, Dr. Diane Golzinski, Director of the Office of Health and Nutrition Services, and Ms. Lisa Gallagher, School District Consultant. Joining us via technology are Mr. Ethan Alexander, Mental Health Consultant from Kalamazoo-Risa, Dr. Bobby Hayes Goodrum, Assistant Superintendent in Farmington Public Schools, Ms. Johanna Marachna, Assistant Superintendent in Ferndale Public Schools, Ms. Kelly Burns Goldberg, a parent from Farmington Public Schools, and Mr. Nikhil Shait, a student from Farmington Public Schools. There will be a PowerPoint presentation. Presenters, welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Rice and Board, for the opportunity to present today. There continues to be a rising consciousness about the need for social and emotional learning and children's mental health and the importance thereof. Today, Board, we are going to present on the fundamental competencies of social emotional learning and why SEL and children's mental health are important to support student growth and development. As Dr. Rice mentioned, we are fortunate to have special guests in the virtual room today, professionals from multiple school districts to share their reflections about their work with SEL and children's mental health. And with that, I will turn it over to our colleagues.
Thank you. SEL skills are needed throughout our lives. SEL is the learning for babies and toddlers and preschool children. Our brains are wired to learn in relationships. Children need to connect to others as they learn. They show us with their arms that they're so big. They make sure we're watching as they put on their snowsuits. They trust us enough to ask for help, to say a word, or to reach for something, or to navigate a friendship. Peekaboo helps children learn about self and others. They're reassured that mom didn't disappear even though she slipped out of sight. This early learning informs how a child tolerates separation with a babysitter or leaves home or goes on a play date. They keep learning about relationships as they enter school, in class, on the playground, on a walk or bus ride home. Think about a 6th grader who enters middle school as a lamb, growing in pro-social skills, and by the end of 8th grade, leaves for high school more like a lion. It's the mix of what they learned about themselves, their teachers, their family, their friends, and their classmates that grooves the path towards self-determination. If we want a profile of a graduate ready for post-secondary living, learning, and working, children need to be equipped with empathy, teamwork, and to know how to set boundaries. They need to be able to say what does and does not work for them. The MDE team is committed to the core value that families are our children's best and first teachers. This SEL wellness work is about standing shoulder to shoulder with parents, caregivers, and the local community to be part of a circle of caring that supports the skills that families and kin began teaching, to say thank you, to listen without interruption, to greet a newcomer. The evidence of the need for these skills is in early childhood, in literacy, in STEM, in career and college readiness, and workforce development. It matters less what we call it. SEL, life skills, metacognitive skills, work readiness, pro-social skills. It matters more that children get big doses of support over time to practice them. Next slide. A multi-tiered system of support provides a framework to integrate SEL as a Tier 1 practice, and then schools can add layers of support to include access to school-based mental health services. Notice that Tiers 1, 2, and 3 provide a way to assure that children have the resources they need. Michigan examples of mental health services include our grant for Project Aware, state funding through 31N, 31O, 31P, and the Interconnected Systems Framework, ISF. This approach integrates behavior, social emotional learning, and mental health. Next slide. We are working with our partners in the field to help schools build these tiers of support. Through the SEL and Children's Mental Health Network, we're working to provide school communities with the best chance for safety and connection. We know that learning's been impacted by COVID. The network is lifting the need for SEL as foundation and hopes to increase access to mental health services. The world's changed since we were young. The complicated world within which our children navigate means we need each other more, and we need partners in every sector. Next slide. There's 5 SEL competencies that build confidence and proficiency. The first 2 are self-awareness and social awareness. We paired them together to tell a layered story. These competencies influence each other. Through self-awareness, we notice what we're thinking and feeling, and at the same time, like I am, we pick up how other people are taking us in or communicating with us. For self-awareness, children need to be able to connect what they feel in their body and how they understand their emotions. Do they notice that they feel happy when they're with a friend? Can they expose themselves to a trusted adult? The shy realization that they're improving in their learning. In a school context, self and social awareness really sing. When a child notices that they're learning and so does mom, their reading buddy, their teacher, their friends. When a child gets clearer about who he or she is, that child has an easier time understanding others. We hope that children can connect their emerging awareness of others and check out a feeling face, a tone of voice, the nonverbal signals that travel with a person's words. In a more complex scenario, as a witness to bullying, an older child's sense of loyalty to their classmates elicits feelings of righteous anger and a move to say stop, remove themselves and their friends from the aggressive behavior. The next 2 competencies, self-management and relationship skills, are connected as well. Self-management means understanding my feelings, how I behave when I'm in the thick of an intense emotion, and the decisions I make so my short-term response doesn't jeopardize my long-term options. I want to feel in charge of myself and feel deep satisfaction when I'm empowered by my feelings and words. Because we're wired for connection, making friends, leaning on a caring adult, working as a team are outcomes of strong relationship skills. Research indicates that in the early grades, when children can't manage strong feelings, other children start to distance from them. These outbursts make it harder for a child to make a friend. Children need help from grown-ups to do what's called co-regulation until they can do it on their own. With infants, adults lend a hand with self-soothing by rocking a baby. As they grow, adults acknowledge a mad face and invite a child to feel their feet, their hands, their breath. Adults need to model calm in such a way that they naturally lean in rather than physically pull away from a child in distress. Adults scaffold this support until children can do it on their own. The countless times that this process goes well means that learners can listen and work together. Next slide. As an example of relationship skills, this video of 2 third-grade Ferndale students, Amaris and Ben, show how they practice being friendly. Look for ways that their eyes align, how Amaris bends just a bit so that the difference in their height doesn't interfere with the connection, and listen for their shared history. This isn't the first time that they've had a conversation.
I'm feeling good today. I'm the yellow and the green, but because I gotta pack my bags today because I have to go to Chicago tomorrow and start driving, and I'm not such a morning person, so I have to see how it's gonna go. But I'm not. At least today I'm not stressed, and actually the advice you gave me on Monday actually really helped my story in my mind, and I thank you for that.
Well, you're welcome, and I hope you have a fun time on that.
I hope you have a fun time too. And I also like your Sonic backpack. Oh, where's Cuphead and the other? Wait, what's the other?
The final SEL competency, responsible decision-making, is clearly connected to academics. Children are informed by their feelings, their classmates, and their sense of community to be able to evaluate information, raise questions, and find solutions. As members of a healthy community, it's essential to involve children in decisions and solutions. They need to be able to seek help for themselves and others. They need to be equipped in all 5 competencies. These skills build on each other. Research says that effective skill building delivered in class in the short term impacts the degree to which these skills can be relied on over time. The strength of the learning during a lesson impacts the degree to which a child's going to use these skills when the stakes are higher. To get help for themselves or for others, consider how the competencies work together. To notice that small voice or gut check that says something's wrong, that's self-awareness. To identify and manage a variety of intense feelings, that's self-management. To sense the risk of what I've heard from a friend or connect with a friend's concern about me, that's social awareness. With family and friends, I need to sort through my limits, that's relationship skills. And as I work with my resources, identify who to talk to, and prepare what to say, that's responsible decision-making. The following list of high-quality instructional practices identifies what needs to be in place to support academic success. Teachers who work this way are guided by common sense and decency. They remove barriers to learning by setting conditions that help children with a sense of belonging, and this includes modeling their own SEL skills. The evidence shows that when teachers align their subject matter with SEL, these are the outcomes. In repeated research studies, SEL instruction both added to learner success and decrease the likelihood of risky behavior. The positive impacts for SEL do not stop after graduation. In a study that compared high school graduates to students who got their GED, the outcomes, earnings, healthy lifestyle, and family stability of the graduates exceeded those who got their diploma through an exam. Economist James Heckman's Nobel Prize-winning work described the difference that made a difference in what he called non-cognitive skills. Being in relationships with educators, where they could practice their skills, prepared these young adults for lifelong success. We'd like now to introduce our honored guest. From Farmington Public Schools, Dr. Bobby Goodrum.
Thank you. I'm going to ask just, are you able to hear me?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Good morning. Farmington Public Schools, together with our community, will engage every student in a quality experience, empowering each student to become a thoughtful, contributing citizen in a changing world. This is our mission statement, and it is reflective of our commitment to create and maintain a positive learning community where we strive to meet all the needs of each and every one of our students. Now, more than ever, addressing the social and emotional needs of the members of our learning community is a critical element in ensuring that learning can even take place. We cannot empower students without teaching them to have a positive self-image. We cannot create safe learning environments without teaching our students to have empathy and to care for one another. The 5 CASEL competencies, self-management, responsible decision-making, relationship skills, social awareness, and self-awareness are all attributes that are integral to the formation of a thoughtful, contributing citizen in a changing world. The CASEL framework speaks to the life skills that our students need in order to be global citizens. We are teaching collaboration, problem solving, self-regulation, appropriate communication, leadership, self-efficacy, critical thinking, organization, all skills that we know are paramount importance as our students leave us to successfully navigate the world. These skills are needed as they progress on to employment, as they form adult relationships, as they go on to raise families of their own should they choose to. This is what we are striving for as we utilize the CASEL framework. Our students need to be able to see the potential in themselves as well as others. They need to feel safe before we can even reach them academically. There is a reason that safety and belonging are both among the foundational levels of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We want our students to be able to ascend on to self-actualization, to be their very best selves, thoughtful, contributing citizens in a changing world. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Goodrum. And with Dr. Goodrum is a parent from Farmington, Ms. Kelly Burns Goldberg.
Good morning. Thank you for your invitation to speak before this important panel. Our 3 children attended FPS from 2002 until 2019. Our eldest son graduated with honors from MSU with a degree in Japanese and works for the Board of Education in Gunma, Japan, supervising English second language teachers for the entire prefecture. His brother graduated from MSU, also with honors, and is a third-year law student on full scholarship at Wayne Law School, who's currently taking a final exam, and he clerks for a prominent criminal defense attorney. Their sister is a high honors junior at MSU majoring in communication disorders and linguistics. She gives mandated trainings in upstander awareness and relationship violence prevention. All 3 of our kids and I trained for many years in mixed martial arts, stopping just short of our 3rd degree black belts. The SEL contribution to our young adult success should not be minimized. Without the ability to read the room, high emotional intelligence, a professional demeanor, the ability to meet and exceed expectations even when frustrated, our kids would not be where they are today. The cultural competencies and empathy that our kids learned from their teachers and classmates enabled them to excel in college and beyond. They are mindful in their language and their actions and strive to be respectful of everyone. Farmington Public Schools has always balanced the individual student and the classroom and peer community. From kindergarten on, their teachers imbued the curriculum with empathic awareness of their impact on others, from icebreakers, projects, group exercises, games, group seating, strong support for different family configurations. FPS gives students the academic and the emotional life skills to succeed. Employers expect their workers to contribute to a culture of respect, not only because it is ethical, but because when employees feel unwelcome and uncomfortable, they are more apt to file lawsuits. Employers need confident employees who excel individually, yet collaborate, walk the walk of respect and kindness, who refrain from social media rants, and who are consistent at work and away. FPS teachers facilitate that sense of community and nurture individuals who become strong workplace leaders, well equipped for their place and mission in the world. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Goldberg. And finally, we'll hear, from Farmington, we'll hear from a student, Nikhil Shade. Nikhil, would you like to share?
Yes, can I get a thumbs up if you can hear me? Awesome. Good morning, everyone. My name is Nikhil Shah, a current senior and class president at North Farmington High School. I'm also a board of delegate for the Michigan Association of Student Councils. I'm here today to present my case and provide data and reasoning in favor of SEL from the perspective of your own target market, students. Over the last few summers, I attended the Michigan Association of Student Council summer camps, where I learned essential 21st century skills that I've used ever since. The same skills taught in SEL: empathy, how to create culture, representation, self-mental health care. The best example of the functionality of these techniques was in the Student Council. In the 11th grade, a girl we will name Jane stated that she would be quitting our class board, a devastating blow to those who worked hard to build the class board culture. She felt as though her thoughts were not recognized and her opinions did not matter. She later left the group, and I decided to take action. I remember what I had learned over the summer, how to build empathy and relationships. I reached out to her, even when it wasn't my job, and spent the next 2 hours talking about the issues that she faced in the group. At the end of the long conversation, she texted the words that still stick with me to this day. She stated, "Thank you. That is the nicest thing I've heard all year." The same SEL skills that I learned over the summer led to this moment, and she later rejoined our class board, leading multiple fundraisers and guiding our homecoming hallway decoration committee to victory. There are bound to be times where situations like these arrive, even in the most perfect of cultures, because all cultures have flaws. We have two choices, whether to ignore the problem or whether to focus on the solution. And SEL is the solution. But don't take my word for it. Take the research study by Joseph Durlach, a professor at Loyola University. In 2011, he conducted a study with 270,000 students, which showcased that SEL programs enhance positive social behavior, lower emotional distress, and here's the kicker. SEL programs led to an 11 percentile gain in academic success. The motivation, self-discipline, stress management, organizational skills, and decision-making all led to this increase in academic success, all skills taught in SEL. The purpose of MD is to develop, support, and sustain the high-quality, prepared, and collaborative educational workforce. MD has a history of being one of the top educational programs in the country, so why not continue the success and prepare our collaborative workforce with essential 21st century skills? I joined the student council in the 5th grade, and I've grown up in the leadership realm. Throughout my time in the leadership world, there's one pattern that stands out. The best leaders are, of course, intelligent, hardworking, kind, but above all, they have the highest understanding of social emotional learning. These 21st century skills are essential because without them, Michigan students may find difficulty in connecting with other Janes around the world. The question is not whether Michigan should incorporate SEL, but whether Michigan wants to create the next generation of emerging leaders, whether to ignore the problem or focus on the solution. The choice lies in your hands. Thank you. And again, my name is Nikhil Shah.
Thank you so much. We're going to switch to another school district. Ms. Johanna Mrachna from Ferndale is going to speak next. Johanna?
Good morning. I want to check that you're able to hear me. All right. Thank you. In Ferndale Public Schools, SEL and mental health support is rooted in our whole child philosophy. We are committed to educating the whole child, and this starts with the recognition that learning is about more than reading, writing, and arithmetic. Social and emotional learning is the process through which students and teachers learn and apply the knowledge, attitudes, and skills necessary to understand and manage emotions, set and achieve positive goals, feel and show empathy towards others, establish and maintain positive relationships, and make responsible decisions. In SEL, our students learn that their emotional brain responds to an event more quickly than their thinking brain. They then learn to recognize, understand, and regulate that emotional response first so that they can engage productively in situations and control their responses. Ferndale Public Schools teachers and administrators are dedicated to educating and nurturing the entire child so each student grows into a purposeful, lifelong learner. Our talented educators have developed a guiding framework that is integrated into the classroom every day, which teaches social and emotional development skills. Through our work with SEL, we have seen direct benefits for our students, including increased academic achievement and decreased suspensions and expulsions. In Ferndale Public Schools, SEL is not a program or a method. Rather, it is a coordinating framework embedded into school-wide practices and policies. Understanding the impact that social-emotional learning has on adults, children, and the environment helps us provide a safe, welcoming environment for everyone. Our mental health supports are directly tied to our SEL programming and part of our whole child focus. This year, we were able to further expand our mental health supports for students with available 31N and 31O funding from the State School Aid Act. This has been important as we have welcomed students back into classrooms in person and has allowed us to support their increased needs. And we are grateful for this needed funding. In focusing on the social, emotional, and mental health needs of our students, we are able to support students now so they can learn critical skills for the future. SEL skills are not soft skills. They are essential skills, and it is the responsibility of schools to ensure that students enter into their lives outside of our halls with the skills necessary to succeed on whatever path they choose. Thank you.
Thank you, Johanna. And then finally, we'll be hearing from Ethan Alexander from Kalamazoo Regional Educational Service Agency. Ethan?
Good morning, everyone. I just want to make sure also that you're able to hear me clearly. Just hand signal, thumbs up. Thank you so much. So I'm honored to be here. My name is Ethan Alexander, and I'm a culture and climate specialist at Kalamazoo RESA. My role is supporting schools that are interested in improving their school climate. I also help to oversee the children's mental health funding from Section 31N of the State School Act, the school mental health effort in Kalamazoo County. My colleagues and I support schools in 9 districts around Kalamazoo County. Social emotional learning is one of several tools that we use. Before I started my career in education, I was in the field of mental health. I spent 15 years working with children and adolescents in home-based therapy, inpatient psychiatric, and residential treatment facilities. I decided to go into school counseling because I believed that schools truly had the power to positively affect students' lives. Over time, I started to understand that we have an opportunity to create classrooms and school buildings that didn't have to feel simply like institutions of learning. They could also be institutions of care, places where students felt safe, supported, and valued. When I hear conversations about mental health in schools, I hear administrators talking about addressing anxiety and depression and self-harm. They want to help give kids coping skills, teach them empathy, and help them create supportive relationships. But I think what so many people miss is that these are complex skills that need to be built over time. It's like asking students to interpret literature, but failing to teach them how to read. In some of the schools that I work in, like Parchment Northwood Elementary and Galesburg Augusta Middle School, I see teachers working to teach kids how to identify their emotions and find ways to manage them. I get to sit in classroom circles as students listen to other students share their experience. I hear stories of teachers using restorative practices so that when one student has a conflict with another student, they participate in a meeting together to understand how their actions impacted other students and what needs to happen to repair that harm. That is when we start to spark skills like empathy and compassion. We see students who are more aware of their own emotions and needs, and who also understand that social and emotional needs of others around them are essential. We have an opportunity to build mental health into schools, but this work doesn't happen only with therapists and counselors. It happens in our classrooms, one small conversation at a time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ethan, and all of our guests for sharing your wisdom and experience in weaving together the skills of SEL with the tiered 2 and 3 work of mental health services. Dr. Govinsky?
Okay. Yes, thank you so much to all of our guests. We asked the question, how is the need for SEL and children's mental health amplified since the events at Oxford High School? During tragedies and celebrations, SEL and support for mental health assist both adults and children to work through life on life's terms. Our capacity to express loss will impact our ability to express joy. In tough times, we need to be able to talk about painful things with a shared language. With some common words, children are less vulnerable to social isolation, anxiety, and sadness. As you can see from this slide, the state of Michigan began investing in direct mental health services in schools in 2018 through both sections 31N and 31O, and supplemented with additional opportunities such as the Equity Fund. Michigan is beginning to increase the numbers of behavioral health professionals within our school buildings statewide. And yet, there is still so much more to be done. What you've heard today is that none of these efforts are standalone answers. Just like a cohesive school building staff and strong academic curriculum, the efforts of SEL, behavioral health services, and behavior threat assessments must be done in strategic partnership with parents and the community. We want kids to be safer and more connected while at school. And we believe that these 3 cohesive efforts will make a difference and will help us to prevent future tragedies, such as the horrors that happened at Oxford High. Thank you.
We appreciate the presentation of all of our presenters, both in person and remotely. Board members, do you have any questions or comments, either in person or remotely? Mr. McMillan.
So I think the first presenter said that with SEL, they're going to be standing shoulder to shoulder with parents. Is that correct?
So
asking the person who's kicked off the whole thing, she said that.
So Ms. Gallagher, yes.
Okay. So, I have heard stories of districts hiding a lot of what is being done with SEL. Parents have had to go all to the extent of FOIAing, and then under FOIA, they're rejected. So, it really, you start wondering how good this thing is if there's all kinds of attempts to block parents to really understand what's going on. So could we, and hopefully maybe Dr. Rice can certainly make the statement that, districts should be very open with parents if they want to stand shoulder to shoulder and start asking questions about home life and things like that. They should really be very open with disclosing whatever parents want to know about SEL. Would that, the panel agree with that?
So I'm not going to speak for everyone on the panel. I believe that that's important. Panel members, your thoughts?
I think I can speak for the group and say we think it's extremely important. That's why we mentioned it. And any guidance and resources we share with districts in this area articulate the need for parental and community involvement and the types of strategies and resources that you're doing in the classroom and the school as a whole.
Okay, including videos and things like that, right?
We think it's important that the entire curriculum is shared with the community at large.
Okay, good. And then, I've talked about this, I think, at the last meeting, but, this MIPHY, these questions, I know that they are supposedly, anonymous, but just the fact that they're being asked kind of, I think, kind of puts into question or maybe makes students think, oh, okay, these are the kinds of things we can talk about. So how often do your parents tell you that they are proud of you? Do your parents notice when you do a good job and let them know? My parents ask me what I think before most family decisions. Do you enjoy spending time with your father, with your mother? People in my family have serious arguments. If I had a personal problem, I could ask my mom or dad for help. How often has a parent or other adult in your home sworn at you, insulted you, or put you down? And then questions like, how many people have you had sexual intercourse? This is with 7th graders are asked this. How old were you when you had sexual intercourse for the first time? Have you ever thought seriously about killing yourself? Ever had a plan? These are just questions that I really wonder why we need to do this. I'm presuming it's under SEL. These are certainly social and emotional type questions, but can anybody tell me, what's the purpose of doing this, of asking these questions? From what I understand, it's very broadly used in schools throughout the state.
Well, let's back up, and I'm going to ask Kyle Garant, our deputy superintendent, to speak to what you refer to as the MIPHY. But if I could, Kyle, if you could speak to the MyFi survey, the extent to which it is required or voluntary by school district, by question, and share a little bit about the purposes, and then perhaps get us back to the topic at hand.
Sure. So the Michigan Profile for Healthy Youth, or MyFi, as Mr. McMillan referred to it, is.
I'm sorry. We'll give him the mask. Just slow down, because you got kind of an East Coast thing going on. And having spent 20 years on the East Coast, I recognize.
I got to hurry up and get someplace.
I could understand you.
Having spent 5 years in New York, I get it. So the Michigan Profile for Healthy Youth was created out of a federal grant back in the early 2000s, and the goal from USAID was, at the time, there was a program called Safe and Drug-Free Schools that, as part of applying for those dollars, districts had to have some sort of needs assessment to identify the needs in their school around drugs and alcohol and other tobacco and other behaviors to be able to justify why they're spending, how they are spending their Title IV Safe and Drug-Free Schools monies. At the time, districts were spending an inordinate amount of money in paying for surveys to be done in districts to be able to provide that needs assessment data to them so they could apply for the dollars. Furthermore, at the time when those surveys, they would take 6 or 8 months to get the data back. And so when you're making decisions about the programming and to support your students, 6 or 8 months of time into a school year is forever, and you want to be able to target what limited resources you have to be able to adjust the needs of your students. So that's the framework or the foundation that MyFi was built on, was to be able to reduce the cost to districts, give them real-time data, which in MyFi, once a district is done, says they're done completing the survey, they get the results back within 48 hours. And again, target, be able to give districts the opportunity to target resources towards their student need. Now, the MyFi is made up of 2 broader national surveys that have been used nationally for multiple decades. One is the Youth Risk Behavior Survey from the Centers for Disease Control, and the other is the Communities That Care Survey, which are the risk and protective factors, the questions that Tom were referring to around, how often do your parents say they're proud of you, those type of things. Whereas the YRBS, or the Youth Risk Behavior questions, are more focused on behavioral questions. Have you had 5 servings of milk a week? Do you get regular physical activity? So the number of questions that are in there cover the gamut of physical and mental health behaviors and and risk and protective factors. SEL and children's mental health are pieces of that survey, but again, it's broader. It has questions around drug use and, again, physical activity or physical inactivity, nutrition, so it's broader. Districts that decide to use the survey, as Dr. Rice mentioned earlier, it is voluntary. Districts choose to opt in or opt out. At both levels, both the high school and the middle school level, there are 2 different options of the survey. One that includes what we call the MyFi Basic, which excludes the sexual health questions, the suicide and depression questions. So there's a version of the survey that if a district chooses that they want to know how their kids are eating or whether or not they're physically inactive and how they might use their resources to address that behavior, they can just take that portion of it. Students and families, even in districts that decide to do it, always have the option to opt out of doing the survey if they don't want their student or students participating in the survey.
But then they don't get the money, right?
There's no direct money that's tied to doing the survey. The broadness of doing the survey or having a survey like this is that if there are dollars at let's say a CMH, a community mental health organization, that they want to partner with the district to apply for a federal grant or to partner with the district to use the resources they do have in a more targeted way, they can use information gathered from the survey.
So can they get the resources without doing the survey?
You can get your base resources without doing any survey, yes. If you want to apply for additional resources associated with children's mental health or physical activity or you might have to demonstrate need. And to demonstrate need, you might have to present survey data. But your base funding in the state is unaffected by whether you survey or not. You don't have to survey a single child with either instrument, and you can get your base funding in the state.
I still got the floor. I appreciate the question, the answers. I still think that it's outrageous that they're being asked. I think parents, in order to opt out, I think they ought to opt in, and districts should say, this is what the type of questions and the ones that I asked, and do you want to opt in to this survey? But we can move on. The last person doing the presenting said that we need to build mental health into schools and into classrooms. What if teachers? I mean, I tangentially know some things, or have had people who are going to therapists and counselors, and I think that, isn't there a concern that teachers really have no training in mental health? Questions can be asked or statements can be made that can actually be harmful, not helpful, but harmful to kids. And maybe that's happening a lot, maybe a little, who knows? But, as this foray into mental health trying to be woven into the classroom, aren't there concerns, A, and then B, if teachers say, no, this is not what I signed up for, what are their options? Can they be moved to a different, is there any option other than getting fired or leaving?
So, were you referring to Mr. Alexander's comments?
Yeah, the last gentleman, yes.
Okay. Mr. Alexander, would you care to share in that regard?
I'd be happy to. Yeah. I appreciate the concern and the comment, and in all of the observations that I've done and the experiences that I have, I've not seen teachers being put in the role of therapist. I think to identify, it looks like you're feeling sad today, or to help a child identify their own emotions, it looks like you're having a rough day, I think is more just being a compassionate human, right? In the experiences that I've seen, social emotional learning embedded into schools, students are being asked questions like, who's an adult who cares about you? Or would you prefer pizza or tacos? So all of those things are strategies just to help students feel valued and heard. I don't see teachers being put in the role of therapist, more being just asked to step up as clearly compassionate and kind-hearted people, which we know teachers are already doing. So I hope that helps clarify.
Saying that teachers are asking the kids, who's an adult that cares about you? It kind of implies that they don't say parent, that their parents don't care about them, right?
That's one example of a question that's used, and I hear many students say, my mom or my dad or my uncle. So that's one of many questions that's used in classroom circles, or sometimes who's an adult that you look up to. I don't see children being questioned about whether they're loved in their family. It's just asking who the support network around you is. Does that help clarify?
Yeah, it does. It's still kind of concerning to me that they would be kind of asking basically, do your parents care for you? Because that's basically what they're asking if the kids don't say parent. But moving on, I just want to focus lastly on Castle. I know that MDE and all the schools are pretty much gone all in with Castle. I don't know if there's any other SEL provider. And I just want to kind of let it be known that some of the reasons why particularly conservative parents and others are concerned is because, like, for example, in 2008, Bill Ayers was pushing Linda Darling Hammond, a radical education professor, for Secretary of Education. She sits on the board of Castle. And Castle in June of 2020 posted a webinar that included social and emotional learning as a, quote, lever for equity and social justice. So this is not some benign, all the things I heard this morning sound nice and flowers and roses, but, it's clear there are other motives in place. Look at some of the funders are very radicals that fund Castle. Nobody on the conservative side, by the way, it's all on the left. So, there's, I think, reason for concern. Things cannot appear what they actually are oftentimes, or I know that recently SEL was redefined by Castle, so, as transformative, and so, through an equity lens. So I just, there's a lot of concerns with SEL, and I'm glad to hear that Dr. Rice, you and the others, I can tell parents that as you look into these matters, that the superintendent and others at this presentation clearly think that there should be no roadblocks. You should be able to see whatever your kids are being taught. videos, surveys, and that they want to stand shoulder to shoulder. And so I do appreciate that from today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McMillan. Other board members' comments. Ms. Snyder.
There's so much to unpack between the presentation, our guests, what's recently happened, comments that Tom has made, comments that all of our board members have made in the past. But it's so complex, and things need to be differentiated. And I think that's what I hear Tom trying to say. So I'm hoping I can do that justice. But what's interesting is that when we think about social emotional learning, it's not a negative thing. It's not a bad thing, right? We know that social emotional learning is appropriate, it's healthy. But the question is, where does the bulk of it occur? Where should it occur? And then when you're at school, what are the boundaries? What boundaries should be in place? So everything that we had in our presentation, these things like self-awareness, social awareness, self-management, relationship skills, responsible decision-making, those are not negative things. But then there were some questions that were addressed that said, can they expose themselves to a trusted adult? That's a really intimate question to ask, right? Can you expose yourself to a trusted adult? And not just one way, at home, but at school. Do you feel like you can expose yourself to trust? Like if you think a student is safe or another student might be unsafe, can you trust that you're going to go to administration or a teacher and say, I don't feel safe? Are they going to do something about it, right? So this isn't just what's happening at home. How does this all pan out? So, and then, Tom, I know you're talking about CASEL. Some people say CASEL, but on CASEL.org it says, we define social and emotional learning as an integral part of education and human development. Yes, I think we can all agree on that, like I just said, but what elements should belong in school or naturally happen in school, like we saw with the kids that had the interaction they had, I think that's a pretty natural interaction that happens, right? But then CASEL also goes on to say SEL is the process through which all young people and adults acquire and apply the knowledge, skills, and attitudes to develop healthy identities. So I won't even finish that sentence because I think that applies to what Tom is talking about, what a lot of conservatives feel, not even just conservatives. I've been to, several meetings where people don't identify as conservative and they feel very strongly that these particular topics do not belong in school, right? So I think we need to explore that. Healthy identity. Why is it up to a school to determine what that means and what is defined by healthy identity? So I think that SEL can significantly be informed by family values, structure, general creed. Those things don't necessarily mirror each other, right? School values don't necessarily mirror family values. And then that can cross over into discrimination against students. A student maybe is not being told to share those types of things with school because parents know school values do not represent what we teach you at home. And if they're asking you X, Y, Z, they shouldn't be, right? So I think that when Tom's talking about surveys, it's a solid example of how we've seen SEL play out in ways that don't mirror or don't actually play out all the wonderful things you guys said in the presentation. That's an opposite example of adults that come together and agree that social emotional learning is important to success. With that said, there was a slide that showed all the things that increased and decreased when social emotional learning is healthy and good. So one could assume that if these behaviors are not what that slide looks like, they're probably not getting social emotional learning at home, right? But does that mean that we then use this particular thing called social emotional learning, create school-based values, and then apply it to all people? I would say no. Other things that we've seen in social emotional learning is things like pronoun education. Again, these are obvious things that are in direct opposition to many students that are taught different values at home about identity. Sexuality, gender identity, a lot of SEL crosses over into boundaries that should be honored at school but are not being honored at school. And yes, there may be students that it applied to, but it should not necessarily be the general population of students. It turns into discrimination. I separate that from a whole issue of mental health and illness because we saw this in Oxford. And again, I don't want to speak too soon. I almost wonder, Michael, if we need, if the state board needs to be briefed by Sheriff Bouchard or who's completed the investigation once it's complete so that we have the details that we need to have, because I don't want to be speaking too soon or not have the facts that should be on the table as we discuss these things. But to Tom's point of teachers are not therapists, yes, we agree, but then even in an Oxford situation, counselors were brought into that conversation. And Ethan, I wonder if you could maybe expand on this, but when you look at a drawing that a student has said, help me, the voices, those are early, that's not just early onset symptoms of childhood schizophrenia, that's a presentation of mental illness. That's not something that you can then say, go back to class. So if we're really, again, I say that with the limited information I have, I feel strongly that that particular situation called for this student getting mental health services now, not later. And so I think about how we're applying this discussion to mental health and to just the greater conversation of what needs to happen next. And I just, you know, there are certain mental health services that need to be identified by the people who are not the teachers, they're not therapists. Yes, I agree, Tom, there. But for the people who are trained, we can't miss those ABCs of safety. We can't apply things to those ABCs of safety that do not apply to ABCs of safety. And then we do actually have to refer out, because those services do not belong provided in schools. So a big old can of worms, and one that we need to unpack together, because I don't think we can decide what happens next or even apply these concepts arbitrarily to the situation that happened in Oxford without really understanding what happened.
Other state board members. Thank you, Ms. Snyder. Please, President Elbridge.
So I appreciate and understand some of the concerns that have been shared, but I think you came here today to dispel some of these myths, right? Like, your presentation is, what is SEL? And the 5 areas that you talked about, I think we can all agree are important. I mean, at the end of the day, what we're doing here is we're raising kids to become adults in a functioning society. And part of that is being able to collaborate, being able to communicate, having the empathy to understand how others feel, having the self-awareness to understand that you may not see yourself the way other people see yourself, and there's a disconnect there, and what do you do about that? These are all things, you know, for those of us that work with people, we deal with the adults, the aftermath of whether or not they have been exposed to these kinds of concepts. And I can tell you that it is much easier when someone has self-awareness and can understand that, you know, the world isn't just through your own particular lens. So I really appreciate the fact that you guys came here today and you tried to demonstrate what SEL is. Are there specific examples in some schools that might deviate from some of this stuff? Yes, but those are things that you address on a one-on-one basis. You don't throw the whole thing out because someone might have asked a question to a kid that you didn't like. At the end of the day, we're all people trying to function together, and I think that, you know, the kids are gonna, they're growing up in a world that we don't completely understand. You know, it's really easy for us as adults to be like, I remember high school, you know, there was this, there was that. I took one of those surveys. Did it ruin me as a human being? No. Did I take it seriously? Of course not. But did I learn something from it? I might have. So, okay, you know, great. But at the end of the day, I can't look back at my experience in elementary, middle, and high school and say, well, I did this, so kids today. These kids are growing up in a universe that we could never comprehend as a 5, 6, 7, 17-year-old. So we have to evolve too. And I think the presentation that you made today is part of that evolution of being able to understand. You have to understand before you can address anything. You have to understand the world that they're living in. And they have to learn to understand that world too. And I think the work that you're doing is helping both of those worlds come together in a greater understanding. So I personally really appreciate the work that you're doing. I think this is fantastic. I think that I hope that you continue to have meaningful conversations with kids and to help them develop into the people that they're going to be, because we're all going to be relying on them in the next 20 years. And I want them to be stable and functioning and happy and healthy. And I think this is a way to get there. So I just wanted to say that, and thank you very much.
Thank you, President Albrecht. Other board members? I'm sorry. Oh, there you go. That's a real hand on a virtual screen. Ms. Lipton, to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I would like to thank each and every presenter who took time out of their day to come before this body to share with us the importance of comprehensive and whole child learning. I think that there's always the tension between the desire for individual freedoms and communal responsibility. I do believe that in a thriving and well-functioning democracy, I believe that a robust system of public education that looks at not just educating students with facts and figures, but also educating them to be better citizens and better caretakers of the democratic society that we all hope to live in and enjoy. I think that is probably one of the greatest gifts of a robust public education system can give. And so I thank each and every one of you for the thoughtfulness as well as the care that you've given to explaining the very, very importance of educating the whole child before this board. So thank you very much for the work that you do and the work that you will all continue to do.
Thank you, Ms. Lipton. So I want to also thank, I beg your pardon.
Student might have his hand up.
Oh, I beg your pardon. Mr. Shate, to you.
Yeah, so I just wanted to add a little bit from the student perspective. I know it was mentioned that some of the SEL standards are flowers and roses, but I think it's very difficult to understand what students are going through right now. In fact, our generation has the highest rate of depression, suicide, and anxiety. There is a problem, and it's going to take a big solution to solve it. And I think SEL is one of the solutions to solve it. I mean, there's no denying like what the research said. I know there's been multiple research studies brought up. I brought up one research study with 270,000 students showing an 11 percentile gain in academic success. This is not just something that applies to one area of life, it applies to multiple. And I think by focusing on these nitpicky issues where we're disregarding the whole nature of what SEL is supposed to do, which is to provide a sort of a full circle of self-improvement. And I think that that we really need to go back to what SEL is the goal of SEL and try to focus on these main points.
Thank you, Mr. Shea. I appreciate you sharing that. We have two others, Ms. Porter and Dr. Pugh.
First, let me thank you all for the presentation and the amazing presenters that you have here. My question is like at the beginning slide, and I didn't hear everything, but there's a board or a committee or a council that you've put together. Will there be folks from like child care that will be a part of that? Do you see a space for them in this social emotional learning supports? I mean, I know that that takes place at that age and stage, but does it fit here?
So it's a year old, the SEL Children's Mental Health Network, and every region is represented, and we have early childhood educators from the Department of Ed on that, participating in that network. We need everybody, and so that might be something that we'd put on the docket to look at school community linkages, and I see child care providers as certainly involved in families and learning to make sure.
And especially, you know, when we look at the burden that is on that population of folks, so child care centers and getting the appropriate workers, and I don't need to say at this table what a critical age it is to begin implementing this there. So that would be great to see someone from child care being a part of that.
Thank you, Dr. Pugh. Ms. Porter?
I'll be brief, but as someone that is in the classroom every day, as a teacher who has taught kindergarten for many years and now teaching upper elementary, and as a person that runs student council in my own building, I just am so appreciative of you bringing SEL learning to the forefront today, specifically having a student speak on it. I think that was just very powerful. I know it was for me, especially teaching little ones and seeing how that work at the earliest grades is so critical to develop incredible humans like Nicole that you just highlighted. So I just wanted to say thank you. This was just a wonderful presentation.
So I would like to underscore that appreciation for our presenters, both our older presenters and our younger presenter. By the way, Mr. Shade, I predict a great career in a helping profession for you of one sort or another. I would like to take the opportunity to remind the board and the broader community that social emotional learning is not new. Its tenets, its competencies have been around for decades. In fact, I remember as a student in college going into the New Haven Public Schools and working with New Haven Public School students in what would be a forerunner of social and emotional learning for Professor Roger Weisberg. May he rest in peace. He recently passed after a bout with cancer. So SEL is not a new thing, and it's not an isolated thing. It's not a left-wing thing. It's not a right-wing thing. It's a thing. It's well understood by educators across the country and many non-educators that social and emotional learning competencies are important. You heard our Western UP superintendents, ISD superintendents, speak to this. I saw it in Western UP schools. I see it when I go to schools across the state, whether they're urban, suburban, or rural, whether they're red, purple, or blue. I see social emotional learning. I saw portions of social emotional learning in the Crawford School, a one-room, subdivided schoolhouse in Kalkaska that was built in 1875. I want to share, and this is the benediction on this subject. I just want to be clear. We're an hour in, and we're a presentation behind. CASEL, the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, is similarly not new. It's not the last day. It's not the last year. It's not the last couple of years. It's decades old. And the competencies as well are decades old. The Fordham Institute, which is a conservative think tank, is supportive of the 5 social and emotional competencies. It's not my opinion. It's what has been written. by the Fordham Institute. It does express reservations about terminology. It does say don't be abstract, be specific in what you are doing with children. To Mr. McMillan's point, be specific to the competencies, be specific about what you're trying to accomplish. But the Fordham Institute acknowledges that schools need to be more than simply the academic, the cognitive, or the intellectual. They need to be about all aspects of children. What some people refer to as the whole child, what some people just refer to as the many different facets of a child's growth and development. Linda Darling Hammond was mentioned. She is a distinguished professor, has been for decades. She's chair of the State Board of Education in California. She's about as fine an educator as you're going to get. To Ms. Snyder's point, I absolutely agree. It's early to talk about Oxford. I think we're all unnerved by what is coming out in Oxford, but I am going to reserve judgment until I see the full investigative report. It's not to say that we aren't unnerved by individual elements. We most assuredly are. I am, you are. But again, I want to wait so that I can separate wheat from chaff, so that I can separate fact from rumor and have a clear understanding of what took place that day. I will say that I think we all understand that our children are more than simply academic beings, and that I think they require some measure of attention in their socio-emotional selves. Some young people require substantial mental health services, but many simply need to learn a little bit more about who they are in the world. To Ms. Gallagher's point, the self-awareness, the awareness of others, the self-management, the relationship to others, the decision-making, which are the 5 competencies. It's not to say that teachers always get this right. It's not to say that they always get every interaction with students right. We have many, many teachers across the state in many schools. Everybody doesn't get it right each and every time. But it would be wrong to throw out baby with bathwater simply because, as President Albridge points out, simply because of certain incidents which aren't properly handled. It was the summer of 2018 when the state first began to fund children's mental health in the State School Aid Act. The summer of 2018. I didn't say the summer of 1918. I said the summer of 2018. 3 years ago. 3 years ago, we began to fund children's mental health in the state at $30 million for 1.5 million public school children. This last summer, in a bipartisan partnership between the legislature and the governor, Republican-controlled legislature, Democratic governor, $240 million in new Section 31.0 funding to hire nurses, guidance counselors, school social workers, and school psychologists. But of course, what we know is it's not like buying salt in the winter at Home Depot or Lowe's or Menards. We're going to have to develop these marketplaces of professionals because for so many years we didn't fund them. And so for so many years people didn't go into these professions in the state. We're going to have to build our mental health supports up so that when children need services, they're able to get these services immediately and not on waiting lists and not with deferred attention. So I share all of that. I do deeply appreciate the presentation by our distinguished presenters. The next item on the committee of the whole agenda is presentation on federal elementary and secondary school emergency relief. This is a presentation.
Dr. Rice.
Yes, Mr. McMillan.
Dr. Rice.
Yes, Mr. McMillan.
My concerns of falsities and questionable statements. SEL is not the same as it has been in the past. Castle is not. They're very transformative. If you're going to tell me that 10 years ago they would have had a webinar about the lever of equity and social justice being used with SEL, it's just plain false. Just like you said, CRT isn't being used or principles taught in classrooms was completely false. So, I don't appreciate, this idea of just dismissing my concerns and Nikki's concerns.
Well, Mr. McMillan, if I could, we've gone an hour and 10 minutes. I think your concerns have been well heard.
Be very brief.
Please.
Based on what we just said, can we, at some point in this meeting, commit to having Sheriff Bouchard come, or once the investigation is complete, have them come and brief us on the issue?
Right. So
And the
I am absolutely happy to invite Sheriff Bouchard once the investigation is complete. I have no issues with that at all. None. The next item on the Committee of the Whole agenda is presentation on federal elementary and secondary school emergency relief. This is a presentation on the implementation of the federal elementary and secondary emergency relief fund appropriations to school districts. It is an informational presentation. No board action is required. Backed by popular demand is one of our previous presenters, Mr. Kyle Garant, Deputy Superintendent of Finance and Operations. There will be a PowerPoint presentation. Mr. Garant, re-welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Rice, and I will do my best to help us catch up on time. Thank you for the opportunity to present a quick overview and an update on how ESSER, or elementary and secondary school emergency relief funds, are being implemented in our state. I will give just a brief background and history as a reminder that there's over the last year, so there's been 3 separate appropriations, federal stimulus packages, starting with the CARES Act in March of 20 and ending with the American Rescue Plan to the ARP Act in March of 21. So in that 3-year period, there were 3 major appropriations for stimulus funding for coronavirus response that included significant monies for schools nationwide. In those 3 appropriations, Michigan's allocation was $5.8 billion total. There are 20 allowable use categories that districts can spend those resources in. So you may remember in previous updates last year that I'd mentioned the number 12 and 15. So over time, the law has expanded, not necessarily in the types of things you could do, but in terms of being more specific to call out things. One example is specifically around school infrastructure, that it was allowed under CARES Act, but it wasn't specifically called out. So over time, lawmakers and USAID has kind of called those things out more intently, so that way people felt comfortable in spending those resources. So I will not bore you with all 20, but I do have them all listed, and I'll just kind of give a quick summary. So these first 6 are primarily, essentially, dollars can be used for any authorized expenditure in other federal education law, whether it's ESEA, whether it's IDEA, or the Adult Education and Family Literacy Act. The law essentially says if it's approved or allowed under these other federal education policy acts, legislative acts, it can CARES, ARP, and CRESA money can be used there. This next kind of group of 5 is a broad kind of spectrum. I'll just call your attention to a couple of them focus specifically on training school staff, whether it's principals or teachers, around providing the necessary resources to address the needs of individual schools, and specific training around sanitation and minimizing the spread of COVID. This next group of 4, you'll just call your attention to number 13 and 14. So the purchasing of education technology and the provision of mental health services are the basis for which the department created the Education Equity Fund that we'll kind of highlight a little bit later. But those are, again, 2 kind of highlights of allowable expenditures that districts can use their CARES money on. And lastly, you'll see a little bit, again, what I mentioned earlier, kind of the more of the calling out of specific things, especially around the academic impact of instructional, lost instructional time. And then as you'll see, number 18 really gets to the pieces around school facilities, air quality, HVAC systems, those type of things, which were not originally specifically called out in the first stimulus package in CARES Act, but in ARP, they specifically put that in there. As a reminder, for all three of those ESSER rounds of funding, states must allocate 90% of the total allocation to their LEAs. So in Michigan, specifically for the ESSER 3, which is the largest of the three stimulus packages, we've allocated out through the Title I Part A formula $3.35 billion worth of ESSER monies, specifically from the ARP ESSER 3 allocation. What you'll notice and what we've worked on with implementing ESSER 3 is that the rules of the game for states and LEAs in terms of applying for money and the types of specific carve-outs that the laws has in there is different than the first two rounds of funding under ESSER 1 and ESSER 2. So for ESSER 3, each state was allocated 2/3 of their overall state allocation up front. But in order to receive the final 1/3 of our ESSER 3 allocation, USAID required states to fill out a state plan template to be approved by them in order to receive the additional 1/3 of money. It was 1/3 of allocation. ARP ESSER 3 also included specific carve-outs for specific activities that states had to set aside, including at least 5% of the total allocation towards addressing academic impact of lost instructional time, 1% towards towards evidence-based summer enrichment programs, and 1% for comprehensive before and after school programs. So the requirements on LEAs, both here in Michigan and nationally, are mirror what the feds have asked states to do. So districts have to apply and include a plan of use for those funds, so how they plan to use those funds. The federal law also calls out a requirement that districts must spend at least 20% of their formula or ESSER 3 allocation to address learning loss. Districts have to have meaningful consultation with community and partner organizations in terms of crafting how they're going to use their ARP ESSER 3 monies. And there's also a requirement for a return to in-person instruction plan at the federal level. So here in Michigan, and the federal law allowed for states and districts that were required through other means to have a return to instruction plan, which for Michigan equated to their continuity of learning plan, which was a state requirement from our state legislature, that districts that already had a plan in place could use that plan and did not have to recreate the wheel. A quick timeline of how things played out here in Michigan in terms of our ARP ESSER 3 approval. So you can see on March 11th, the president signed the ARP into law. We received our 2/3 of our allocation, $2.4 billion, on March 24th. It's important to remember, and I've called this out in previous presentations, that although the feds approved and gave us those resources, in order for us to distribute those and allocate those to schools, the legislature was required to act to appropriate those funds for our use. On April 21st, the ED released the state plan application to states with a required due date of June 7th, which is when we as Michigan submitted their application. And then on June 30th, we received a letter from USAID outlining concerns they had with our state plan. So primarily there were 6 concerns, 2 of which were pretty simple that we just need to add some more justification. But 4 really centered on the use of the state set-asides and what we were planning on doing with those resources. Now, at the time, there were conversations around using what the 10% reserve that each of the 3 ESSER rounds of funding allowed states to use, which for ESSER 3 equated to $363 million. There were conversations in the legislature and proposals around using those monies to create an equalization payment for districts that receive less than $1,093 per pupil in their ARP ESSER 3 formula allocation. You may remember under ESSER 2 funds, the legislature took similar action. The bar was set at $450 per pupil in terms of districts that received less than that. However, at that time, the legislature used state GF to create those equalization payments. Whereas here under ARP ESSER 3, they're proposing to use the federal set-aside monies related to ESSER 3 to create that. And as I mentioned earlier, there were requirements in the federal law for states to spend those set-aside monies in specific areas. So in the proposal from the legislature, there was a requirement in the state law that matched what the requirements were for the federal ARP Act, which included funds being targeted towards student populations disproportionately impacted by COVID. And then you see the 3 buckets there in the bottom bullets there around specific set-asides for learning loss, summer programming, before and after school programming. And then the remaining percentage districts should use at their discretion in accordance with the allowable use of funds in the ARP Act. So on July 13th, the governor signed the legislatively adopted school aid budget, which included the equalization payments. USAID had a concern that because of the way those monies would be allocated, that not all students in the state would have the opportunity to benefit from those resources. And again, as I mentioned, there's a specific focus at the federal level that those resources be spent on student populations disproportionately impacted by COVID. So on August 5th, Dr. Rice and State Budget Director at the time, Dave Masseron, met with USAID officials to discuss the need for an equalization payment and how it would be implemented here in Michigan. So, board, as you know, with the Title I allocation formula for the formula allocation in ESSER, those that needed the most resources essentially got the most resources. And the argument for the equalization payment was that there needed to be some level of floor set for districts that may not have a high number of those student populations disproportionately impacted by COVID, but still had those populations of students that had been disproportionately impacted, and they needed enough resources to be able to support those students in an effective manner. On September 23rd, Dr. Rice and Director Ackley met with USAID Secretary Cardona while he was in state touring various sites throughout the state, and again made our case for why we think those districts that did not receive over $1,093 in ESSER 3 formula monies needed those additional resources. A week later, we got additional feedback on what we needed to submit to them to better articulate how those monies would be used and how that equalization payment would be implemented. And we turned that around within 5 days and submitted those revisions. And then again on October 8th was when our plan was approved. So I will say, generally, when you look at all states, we were in the latter third of being approved from the feds for our state application, and the equalization pay was kind of the equalization payment was kind of the contention of making sure that USAID was comfortable with the way we would use those dollars. So we opened the application in districts on September 15th to be able to apply. The initial application due date is actually tomorrow. So again, in ARP ESSER 3, there are a lot more requirements on states in terms of how they implement things, one of which was that we had to implement a 90-day, no later than a 90-day requirement in terms of districts applying for those resources. And it's important to note, board, that at the same time, a week before the governor signed the current year's State School Aid Act into law, there was a supplemental in Public Act 47 that appropriated the remainder of our ESSER 2 allocation that goes to schools. So approximately $840 million had not been appropriated yet of our ESSER 2 funds. And so districts now have had to go back into their applications and apply to include those remaining allocations that they were entitled to that had not yet been appropriated. So, and in this next slide, you'll kind of see kind of the backup of, so CARES Act, which is in that first column there, ESSER 1 formula. You see how much was allocated, how much districts budgeted, and then how much the department has approved. And so you see a really good, pretty much all the resources have been approved in CARES Act. The 0.01% that might be outstanding is likely a district that's amending their application, so they've submitted an amendment for us to approve. But districts are, you can see districts are pretty well spending down and using those CARES Act monies. A similar story for the Education Equity Fund. And then you see in ESSER 2 a change. And so, and that change is because of the initial allocation of ESSER 2 monies, districts are now going in and adding those resources to their budgets, and we are then approving them. So then when you will not see ESSER 3 formula monies on there again because the application is due tomorrow. And for the most part, districts, as they apply, there are, the requirements for community engagement, stakeholder feedback. There's more of a process in terms of applying for those ESSER 3 monies that districts are having to build on top of applying for the ESSER 2 monies. And one last thing in terms of calling out the importance to note the end dates for those resources. So ESSER 1 monies have to be spent by September 30th of 2022, which districts I think are well on their way of doing. It's the smallest of the three stimulus packages. ESSER 2, those monies need to be expended by September 30th of 2023. And then for ARP ESSER 3, the final expenditure period is September 30th of 2024. So with those that ESSER 3 amount, it's the largest of the three packages. It's significant amounts of money for districts. And there's a balance between rushing to use the money now and thinking strategically and planning strategically to be able to use those resources over that period of time to best support the needs of students and community. And just would like to thank Kevin Walters in the audience here. Kevin's the manager of our grants and contracts unit here at the department. He's done a phenomenal effort in terms of educating and supporting districts and applying and understanding these resources and the technicalities that go along with the federal requirements, and has been approving applications all this time as well. So thank you, Kevin. And he's here to help me look smart and answer any questions that I might not be able to answer. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Dr. Rice.
Thank you very much, Mr. Garant. I understand the importance of division of responsibility. So we appreciate the presentation. We appreciate your hard work. We appreciate Mr. Walters' hard work as well. Board members, any questions or comments regarding ESSER 1 in the CARES Act, ESSER 2 in CRESA, ESSER 3 in ARP? Going once, and I beg your pardon, we have Dr. Pugh and then Ms. Lipton. Dr. Pugh?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was thinking Ms. Lipton. So when we were getting the ESSER 3 funds, the thought was that we would also have infrastructure dollars for schools in now the Build Back Better plan, or the infrastructure dollars. First of all, are we monitoring what will be available moving forward? And then are we also monitoring how schools and upgrades have been done related to, for health purposes, related to COVID-19?
Sure.
Go ahead.
All right, thanks, Kyle. Yes, to answer the question about monitoring, at this point, because we don't have final expenditures, that will happen as the grants end. So in the case of ESSER 1, we will not have, they don't have to liquidate those funds until December 30th of 2022. But at this point, within their applications that are reviewed for approval, that's for allowability, reasonable and necessary, all the factors that we look at this point, we do have a collection, and we can look at how districts are budgeting those funds to spend in that regard. And we continue to track that. It will become more prevalent in the monitoring phase. Some of the monitoring will start as districts draw 100% of their funds. In other words, all of the funds are fully drawn. There's an expectation within 60 days that they file their final expenditure reports. That will then subsequently trigger the monitoring portion of what we do in going to look at some of those things. But we do track those within the application. We know exactly what they are budgeting for to get approval for those release of funds. The local district has to provide enough detail and information for us to make a determination. And again, as Kyle had mentioned, with ARP ESSER 3, there's a significant number of thresholds that have to be met in each of those budget items.
And I'll just say, it'd just be a horrible thing if we had these funds and we did not address the concerns as it relates to ventilation. Obviously, I think, water, we hopefully will be set there, but if we're not addressing the ventilation needs and other building needs at this time, it would be horrible. And I mentioned the infrastructure and the Build Back Better bills because we originally thought that we would have seen more, even money for schools to build from ground up, and it doesn't look like that's going to happen. So hopefully schools weren't planning on those bills to be able to do that. And so hopefully we're keeping an eye on that.
We are, Dr. Pugh, that's a very good message and a very good point. And one of the things that's different with ARP ESSER 3 from ESSER 1 and 2 funds. Now, ESSER 1 funds initially did not contain an opportunity to upgrade things like indoor air quality or mitigate the spread of the virus. ESSER 2, when it came out, did include those funds. In ESSER 1 and 2, the local districts did not have to solicit local stakeholder or public input into development of how they were going to spend those funds. That requirement is solely for ARP ESSER 3. So as they're looking at those things, the stakeholder meaningful consultation with stakeholders, identified stakeholders, must take place in the development of the plan, as well as public input into the development of the plan. So those districts in the past that have made those decisions, not necessarily fully engaging all of those stakeholders for ARP ESSER 3, as Kyle mentioned, there's a significant focus on that LEA plan for use of funds that must be submitted with their application, and they have to document that they engaged in that meaningful consultation to get that. So if the communities feel that strongly that that's how those funds should be spent, they should be reflected in their plan, and then subsequently should be reflected in how those districts spend those funds in their budget. But we are monitoring that.
Thank you for sharing that, Mr. Walters. And just to add to that, we've actively encouraged local school districts to work on their ventilation systems, to work on their mechanical systems. And the reality is that, but for these dollars, this is the opportunity. I think that's Dr. Pugh's point. This is the opportunity in many districts that don't have bonds, they don't have sinking funds, they're not likely to have them anytime soon. And these major infusions of dollars, which are truly extraordinary, which are truly generational, are the opportunity in this generation to get something done that should have been done decades ago. And this is the moment, get it done. We've had that conversation. We've had the conversation not simply with individual groups of superintendents, for example, with Middle Cities, but also with broader groups of superintendents like MASA. So we'll continue to beat that drum. We think that that's important, and we anticipate that early next school year, we'll be back raising that issue at this table as well.
And getting it done the right way, because there will be snake oil salesmen trying to sell people all types of fixes, and so getting it done the right way.
That is true, although that is beyond the capacity of this department and this entity to address, but it's not beyond the capacity of Eagle.
Or a sister
That's
arm.
exactly right.
That we have to collaborate.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Pugh. Ms. Lipton, to you.
Thank you to the presenters. That was very, very helpful and informative. Just going back to the issue of equitable funding, and as a parameter of the state strategic plan, and also as to information that has been provided by a number of statewide studies on the true costs of educating a child in Michigan. Can you provide some insight onto whether these funds, understandably non-recurring funds, as to where they get us in terms of truly funding the actual costs of educating a child in the state of Michigan?
You know what? I'm going to take the first crack at that. They are non-recurring funds, Ms. Lipton, as you point out. And so their ability to serve on a recurring basis for the vast majority of the costs of public education, teacher costs, support staff costs, administrative costs, are simply not there. Are they valuable? You bet. They're valuable for mitigation, from a mitigation perspective. They're valuable from an improvement of capital facility perspective relative to air and water quality. They are valuable in terms of professional development. They're valuable in a whole host of different ways. But dealing with the enduring issue of inadequate recurring resources to educate children in the state of Michigan, they are not sufficient. They are not structured for that purpose. 6 studies in 6 years, not my opinion, although it is my opinion, but 6 studies in 6 years have said the same thing. We underfund public education. And these pandemic relief funds, however appreciated by public educators, are not a substitute for enduring adequate resources to educate our children. Yeah, thank you. I hope that answered your question. Mr. Garant, Mr. Walters, if I left anything on the table. Okay, all right, very good. Thank you. Anything else for the good of the group before we break for lunch? Going once, twice. I see something up in the chat. Someone waiting in the lobby. I'm not sure who that is, but now they're in. Board members, it is 12:06. We appreciate the presenters and their presentation. Thank you so much. It is 12:06. We will reconvene at 1:10. We will begin